What's up everyone, my name is Rosendo, welcome back to my channel, and we are back with another video, and today we are back with more track reviews. Second video of the year. I know the last one was my discography tier list that I really like doing. That's going to happen every year, but now we're back with some track reviews. I don't really have any other video ideas. I mean, obviously you guys got the City of Rain breakdown, you'll get another track breakdown probably in 2 or 3 weeks or so, but until then we are back with track reviews because I did mention this is something that I want to take seriously with my channel. I actually think it's something that might be the future of the channel. Me, as I mentioned, probably in the first video, of me being someone who likes to really immerse myself in music, understand the ins and outs of it, and really try to get an idea of how everything works to really give it an objective rating as possible. So we're back with another track review, first one of the year. Hopefully there will be many more. I know I said last video I'll try to do 2 a week. Maybe we'll see. That it definitely won't be this week. I just spent a ton of time editing not only last video but another video on a second channel that I have. For any of you lifting enthusiasts out there, I do have a lifting channel. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we are back with track reviews, taking a look at another track. I'm excited to get back into it, excited to kind of break down the ins and outs of tracks and kind of hopefully learn a little bit about how certain artists do things, how certain things can be done with tracks, and ultimately to give my review on some tracks and listen to some new music. So don't forget to like and subscribe, but without further ado, let's hop into Spotify. All right, we are back in Spotify, this time taking a look at Jai Wolf's latest track, Nothing Left to Lose. We'll be taking a look at this one today. This is the one I chose for today. Now, hopefully you've seen the first video where I talk about kind of my process in going about this. If not, quick 15-second reminder. I listened to the track completely immersed earlier in the day. I then listened to it again while driving to get a slightly different setting, and this will be my 3rd time listening to it right now with you guys. But let's not put it off any longer. Let's get to the track review, starting with the preface. Because I've listened to this track, there's usually a few things I like to call attention to, usually something I like to highlight in each track review, because, you know, if I listen to a track, I might say, okay, in this track review, let's talk a little about, you know, arrangement, let's talk a little about drums, let's talk about progressions. I know in the second video I did with the Rocketeer remix, I said, let's talk about remixes today and how we might assess remixes. You know, we talked about a lot of things, and today what we're going to highlight is specifically phrases, because this track actually does something pretty standard, right? But it's a good track to analyze in phrases, to kind of see how they work together, how they might differ, how one does one thing, how one does another, and kind of how it affects the track as a whole. So we're going to get to listening to this in a second, but hopefully you guys are familiar with phrases. Again, I like to assume that, you know, I'm not kind of talking to people who are, you know, absolutely experts in music, but I'm also not talking to people who know nothing about music. I like to assume that you'll have a very good fundamental understanding about music, you know, BPMs, phrases, you know, keys, chords, intervals, and, you know, things like that. But if not, a phrase is simply where we look at 8 bars, in this case, 8 bars of a track, 32 beats of this track. And even if that doesn't make sense, a phrase is essentially kind of where the track does something new, right? You know, in most tracks, you'll recognize that you'll have, you know, an intro, maybe a first verse, you know, maybe about halfway through the first verse, the vocals change or they add a new instrument. And then maybe you'll have a build up, and then maybe you'll have a drop, and then second verse and things like that. Those are essentially phrases. Those little sections of a track are phrases. And this is definitely a good one to analyze some phrases for today, because pretty simple track, nothing too extravagant or anything. We're going to be going over Jai Wolf. Before we start, I did also want to mention that I'm actually a big fan of Jai Wolf. Jai Wolf is probably one of my top artists. I don't listen to him as much recently just because I listen to so many artists, but when I was first getting into EDM, Jai Wolf was kind of one of my top artists. He was definitely on my Spotify Wrapped a few times, and he's still an artist whose tracks I really like. And there are a few artists who I listened to a lot earlier who make tracks that sound a specific way that I don't really find other artists make tracks that sound the same way. Jai Wolf and Son Holo are too. You know, a lot of earlier Jai Wolf tracks are just really uncomparable to any other tracks. They're so unique. I really like them. Now Jai Wolf is a little bit more, I want to use the word commercial, but kind of in a good way. The tracks are a little bit more kind of easily taken in instead of being something a little bit more creative and expressive in his earlier music, which I really like. But now his music has taken a turn a little bit, probably for the better. I still like it. I like his old stuff more because it's a little bit more expressive, but I do think he makes really good music now. There's still some songs, some of his more recent music that are on my playlist. Even if we just take a look at his Cure to Loneliness album, which I actually really like. There's some tracks on here that, you know, are just so unique. But today we're talking about Nothing Left to Lose. We're talking about something a little bit more commercial, and we're just going to assess it and rate it from a scale of 1 to 10 at the end. Specifically, we're going to call attention to some phrases. So why don't we get to it? Listening to this track. And final reminder, I will be doing commentary over the track because it is my 3rd time listening to it. If you want to listen to it on your own before watching this, go ahead. But we are going to get into it. As a reminder, for copyright reasons, I will not be playing the track's audio, but we can all listen to it together at the same time. Starting now. Nothing Left to Lose by Jai Wolf in 3, 2, 1. Starting with an intro that I really, really like. Nice creative intro here. Nice intro that asks you to be immersed already and kind of be intentional in your listening into a melody, a beautiful melody, already setting a really nice mood for the track, I will say. Kind of a mood that already puts you in the track's universe, gives you a nice melody, a nice touch. Vocals come in. Here is what we're going to call phrase 1 of the verse, phrase 1 of the first verse. Vocals are really nice. Again, good emotion. I really like the effects in the background. Nice rolling bass there that I really like. It's a nice noise that I use a lot in my tracks. Second phrase. Very good movement in the vocals from the second phrase. Something I really like when tracks do, separating the melody of the vocals in the first phrase and the second phrase in the same verse. I also do like the melody of the vocals. Going into what is effectively the build up here into the first drop. First drop with a nice kind of big vocals there, big melody. I'll be objective here and say that I don't love it, I don't hate it. I'm very neutral about this first drop. I'll talk a little bit about in the end why I think so. But again, this is phrase 1 of the first drop. We're going to go into phrase 2 in a second. Pretty standard phrase, average in my opinion. Into the second phrase, which I do like. The elements altogether are a little bit unique and they all do kind of different things. I do like the melody. I do really like the melody. But again, this is the second phrase that kind of pairs with the first one, right? You have the first phrase with a certain melody, phrase 2 with the second melody into the next part of the track, verse number 2. Here we go. The thing about this track is it can pretty cleanly divide it in half where you have the intro, verse number 1, drop number 1. It's pretty symmetrical in the second half, which is something I've kind of voiced my opinion about on the progression of tracks and if you can do that and whether or not, you know, you can. The short answer is I don't really like it when tracks are too symmetrical like that. Now, that doesn't mean the artist needs to absolutely do something new every single time for the second verse and for the second drop, but it does definitely mean that it takes away from the progression of it, from the possible progression. Similar phrases for the similar kind of phrase split in 2 for the second verse into the second drop, which as far as I can tell, or at least taking kind of instinctively sounds the same as the first drop. Same thing, that melody, vocal comes in into melody, the second melody. Again, still a really nice melody. I actually didn't really compare this part to the second half of the first drop in the first drop, so I don't know if this part's any different. But again, at face value, it sounds the same. Pretty symmetrical. Going straight into your outro. Vocals drag on, strings that I really like. I've mentioned before, I'm such a fan of strings. I include them in almost all of my tracks. Good vocal harmonies that I'm just now noticing because it's my first time listening to them on these headphones. Good mood at the end. And the track comes down. And that brings us to the end of the track. So there you go. There's Nothing Left to Lose by Jai Wolf. The biggest thing I want to call attention to are 2 things really here. Number 1 is kind of the symmetry from the first half of the track to the second half. It's tough to say artists should always, and I mentioned this already, but it's tough to say that artists should always do something new in the second half. But I've already said that I like progression. I think all tracks should have some form of progression, or if they don't, it should be intentional that they don't have some form of progression, which then kind of gets into the whole Starships remix on intention and, the art versus the artist and complicated things like that. But the point is, the first thing that kind of sticks out to me is, to some extent, a lack of progression is kind of the first thing that sticks out to me. I do really like the mood of the track, and I do really like that melody that includes kind of those plucked, it's pretty standard, typical Jai Wolf melody that I really, really like. So this track does have good things going for it. The mood, the melody, even kind of the whole atmosphere in general. Some good vocals that really kind of fill up the space really nicely. They're processed really nicely as well. The symmetry does kind of make the track take a hit in the progression standpoint. And to me, progression and storytelling is just such an integral part of tracks that I think all tracks should have some form of progression or storytelling. the lack of progression and the symmetry does kind of take a hit. Now, thing number 2, here's where I get to be nitpicky, because again, to some extent, these reviews are a place for me to be nitpicky as someone who likes to listen to music and who likes to review music and likes to kind of see the ins and outs and appreciate the storytelling and intention and decisions behind tracks. Here's where I get to be nitpicky. The drop is really interesting, and it's kind of in a weird middle ground where you have the phrase 1 of the drop and then phrase 2 of the drop. We're not going to distinguish between the first and second drops because they're practically identical as far as like, we're not going to say they're practically identical, but effectively they're identical. I want to say, I could be wrong. But as far as kind of my expectations and what I wanted to get out of the track, you start the intro with that really nice, well, first of all, you have the stuttering effect, what I would call an artistic effect. And then you start it with that really nice melody playing over some really nice chords. It kind of makes you want more of that. So when you get to the first half of the drop where you have that kind of vocal melody, that's, what sounds like a quarter note and what it sounds like quarter notes on the synth. And I think on the bass as well. Let me take a listen again. I can't quite make it out. It's definitely a quarter note on the melody. It doesn't sound like a quarter note on the bass, and it doesn't sound like a quarter note on the chords, but it might sound like the effects or reverb on the melody are also in quarter notes, so it kind of gives it more of a quarter note effect. That's not the point. The point is this. The point is somewhat of a simple, non-emotional, not too artistic melody for the first drop. It's in such a weird spot where the first melody is pretty simple. It can be enjoyable in a simple sense. If it were simply a simple melody, I think it could be enjoyable. When you pair it with that second melody, that is that really beautiful pluck, it kind of leaves you in the middle ground where, okay, you have a simple melody for the first half, you have a beautiful melody for the second half. It almost to me feels like they don't pair all that well together because you already introduced the melody in the intro, you kind of want more of that. So when you get the drop, you're expecting something probably a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more expressive. And when you get that simple melody, it kind of takes away from what you want out of the drop. And then it delivers that melody. And then it kind of shows that, okay, the drop could go that way, but it didn't really. To me, it doesn't sound like they pair too well because you have what is something simple and something beautiful that I really don't think they pair all that well together. It kind of leaves you torn on what exactly you want, and to some extent what the track wants or what the track wants to deliver to you. Does it want to give you something simple and kind of just allow yourself to be immersed in the world of those vocals, or does it want to kind of transport you a little bit more with that new melody and that new narrative? Tough to say. I am nitpicking at the end of the day, but I am a big advocate of kind of storytelling and the small things like that, like how melodies work together and how they kind of enhance or portray the experience of the track, is something that I think, I always urge people to take into consideration when they choose melodies and effects and bass lines and all that stuff. So to me, it doesn't sound like they pair all that well. I like the nice simple melody. I like the beautiful melody, but when it feels like you kind of have to pick or choose one another instead of being able to enjoy both, I think the track, it gets a little bit torn. Add to that the symmetry between the first half and the second half, and you end up with what to me just sounds like an average nice track. I've said before, average tracks are a good thing, not a bad thing. So, that's kind of where I'm at with this track right now. Which brings us to the final section, which is what I rate this track. It's really, really important that you guys watch the first breakdown, maybe even the second one, to know how I rate things, because after I give this rating, if you guys haven't seen these, you might think that I'm being too harsh. To some extent, I wouldn't say I'm harsh. I would say I'm strict though. So where do I leave this track? I thought about it. I listened to it for the first time. I thought about it. I listened to it to the car for the second time, and I thought about it. And, I do think I'm going to solidify my rating at a 5 out of 10, which, as a reminder, is a good thing. I do think that we have an average track on our hands. There are things that it does well that I like about it, and there are also things that I think could be done better. And all in all, gives you an experience that is a pleasant experience, but nothing that, I would go crazy over. I think it's a nice average track, and, don't be surprised that a lot of my ratings might fall in here. Statistically speaking, you might be able to argue that most of your ratings should fall out at a 5 out of 10, if we're looking at like a Gaussian distribution or something, and definitely most of my ratings fall out at 5 out of 10. So it's not meant to be a bad thing, and I'm probably going to repeat myself for every single time I give something a 5, but hopefully over time, I won't have to, but that's not the point. The point is nice, solid, average track. I would put this in line with a lot of other tracks that I don't like, I don't dislike. Hey, they're good. They have some good elements to it. Pretty average track like most tracks are, hey, that's a nice song, nice track. You can listen to it. You cannot listen to it. Don't hate it. Don't love it. Puts it right there. I do like Jai Wolf. I do like some of the elements of this track. Overall, the listening experience on the track, I would give at a 5 out of 10. Not a bad thing, meant to be a good thing, I would say, in general as well, because it means you have a nice average track that you did, some good things with, which is awesome. So There you go. Nothing Left to Lose by Jai Wolf. 5 out of 10. And there you go. You guys can let me know if you agree or disagree. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Let me know if you listen to Jai Wolf, if you've listened to this track, what you think about it, what your thoughts were when you listened to it for the first time. Let me know if you guys pick up on things like phrases, and especially in this case, melody pairings is probably the bigger one. Phrases are pretty standard stuff in all tracks. Here we're just talking about the symmetry of the track, which is, not too uncommon in a lot of tracks. A lot of tracks are pretty symmetrical. But other than that, we talked about phrases. Here specifically, we talked about melody pairings and kind of their effect on the listening experience. Let me know if you guys pick up on that. Let me know if you agree or disagree. And even if you guys say, hey, I don't care, it doesn't matter, it's just a track that, I want to enjoy and have some good elements in it. Why are we, getting ourselves hung up on melody pairings and things like that? If you guys disagree, let me know as well. Any thoughts you guys have, drop in the comments. I always want people to be able to express their thoughts, maybe even challenge one another, as long as we can all explain our reasoning and maybe even enhance or refine our own beliefs on what we like or dislike and things like that. Remember, I want this channel to be a place of discussion, so make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but other than that, that is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.